What is up, you guys? Welcome to Illumination Lab. My name is Justin, and today we're going over this aquarium scene in Cinema4d. My goal today is to walk through my process, as always, show the references I use, and ultimately how I constructed this project as a whole. So, without further delay, let's get into it. So for this scene in Cinema4d, I use these two references here. I think references in general are very crucial in the art process because they provide a solid foundation for your creativity, essentially. So I think they accurately capture the details of subjects and, the proportions and the lighting. So when looking at these two, I really liked the one on the left here where it had all this vegetation and just sea life in general. I thought the coral in the back was pretty cool, so I wanted to try to incorporate those somehow. And then the one on the right I thought was pretty interesting just from all the colors that it has. It's a more bioluminescence option, so eventually I don't really go down this route. I actually tweak it slightly where I focus a little bit more on a high contrast look. So even though we didn't necessarily go with one of these, or I think we ended up taking certain elements of this and making it our own. And I feel like too, I often had these on another monitor here. I was constantly looking at them as I was setting up some of this different plants and rocks to make sure that I kept, a good amount of realism in here and to just kind of give me a good frame of reference to work off of. Mainly in this scene here, we're going to work off of mega scans within Quixel Bridge. So I try to play around with those a little bit, and then eventually I kind of piece it together to see what we get. So with starting the scene here, I start off with a cube and I shrink it down here. And I think what's cool is when we pop over here to Quixel Bridge, there's just so many different options when it comes to all these different mega scans within the library. So I probably took at least a good, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, just looking through all the different options here. I did cut most of it out because it'd probably be pretty boring to watch, but I was basically looking through all of these, of course, look at my references, and soon I start to kind of put together this pretty interesting piece. I did make a similar one before this. I ended up not going with it. I just used that one more as just a practice round. So I thought now that I already have created the scene, I would actually show you guys what I make from this. So I did take some elements from that scene and then popped it into this one here. So you guys will be able to kind of just see how the process is. So to start off, I actually found this mushroom set here. I thought it was pretty cool. I like the yellow goldish look that this one had, so I thought it'd be pretty cool to throw into the scene. And then the mushrooms just added something a little bit different. Typically you don't see mushrooms in the ocean, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to pop it in just to make it look a little bit different here. Of course, with all these mega scans, I think I said it in the last video, you do have to edit them a bit when they are imported into Cinema 4D. So I'm just going here and reducing all the global illumination and reducing some of this down. So, because if not, usually at these renders, I think you actually see it here in the render view itself, you get this glossiness. And so typically with rocks, you know, they don't come glossy like that. So typically I will turn that down. And then when it comes to plants, you do have to turn off luminance because it'll come in as this white translucent looking figure. so that is something you actually do have to keep in mind when you're bringing in these assets from Quixel Bridge. So I use these two rocks as my starting point. I kind of put that in the background here, and then eventually I'll work off of these two rocks, slowly start to build the scene up. And I also think during this process, it's extremely important to organize these assets. So if you see over here on the right side, you see all of these assets. And so definitely as you go along, you should organize them so you can track them, or it just won't be as messy. I feel like I tend to kind of get lost in the process, and I end up forgetting to organize them, so it does take time for me to scroll through some of them if I need to relocate something. So just a quick tip, if you can, or if it's easier for you, definitely make sure to organize these so you can actually find them later on when you need them. And as I'm building up this scene here, I think the most difficult part about this process is that you do have to be mindful of the assets that you bring in and their specific resolution. So the last aquarium model I brought in a lot of 4K resolution assets. Eventually I built up this entire really cool scene. I put a lot of cool detail into it, and then eventually I could not render it at all. So I was kind of bummed out. I felt like I wasted my time building up this really cool scene, and then eventually I couldn't render it out. So this here, what you guys are seeing, this is my second attempt. Like I said before, I kind of changed it up a little bit versus the last scene, but I am a little bit more careful when it comes to how much assets that I'm bringing into the scene, just so I can actually end up rendering it at the end of the day. And then right here, I'm putting in a light source. Really, the reason why I'm doing this is I just want to see what kind of shadows these rocks and these plants will have, just so it can kind of give me an idea of what it's going to look like in the future. So sometimes I'll do this while I'll pop up a light. I know we're doing this underwater scene, so I'm playing around with these blues and purples here. So I just play around with this light here just to see what it may look like, and then adjust accordingly. And these atlases here are pretty cool. What I like about them is you get a good amount of detail, almost like a 3D asset. But I think when using atlases, all the textures are just, packed into a single image. So I feel like, and I may be wrong on this, but I feel like it's easier for the GPU to render an atlas versus a 3D asset, just because, when rendering, it looks at all the different textures and the actual size of it, versus with an atlas, you actually get a single image. And so I knew with this scene, I wanted it to be very heavy in vegetation. Typically with the 3D plants or just 3D assets in general, that does take up a lot of memory. So with starting out the scene, I wanted to use a few different atlases because it gave me the really good looks of a 3D object, but we had a little bit more flexibility when it came to packing in the scene a little bit more. And with the atlas as well too, I brought them in at a 2K resolution because, again, just wanted to pack the scene with as much as possible, and I still think the 2K resolution does the final render justice. And then here, my my recording actually cut out. So what you guys missed is I brought in a dome light. So for those who don't know, a dome light is like a spherical light source that kind of just surrounds the scene. So eventually you'll see here, I utilize the dome light to create that deep ocean atmosphere that we're trying to go for. And what's really cool about a lot of these atlases is they have multiple models within an atlas, or as you see here, multiple plants. So I just find the one that I like and then cut out the rest of them, and then I apply it to the scene here. And what's cool too is with a lot of these 3D assets and just mega scans in general, you do have the option of going in and also changing the textures of them and changing the colors of them. So if you find a model that you like but it's not really the right look or the right color for the scene, you can always import them and then adjust it later on, depending on what you specifically need. And in one of the references that I'm using, what I really liked was they had this really cool looking coral in the scene. So I tried looking through Quixel Bridge quite a bit to see if they had a 3D coral asset. Unfortunately, they do not. So what I'm gonna do here is hop over to CG Trader, look at a few different coral options, and then import it here. And then eventually we'll apply different textures to it to kind of fit the mood or just kind of fit the scene how I want it to. Then for the grounds of the scene, I wanted to bring in the landscape and just shrink it down because I thought it would add a really cool looking texture to kind of replicate sand almost, but I eventually don't invest a lot of time into it. I just end up using it just for its texture. I don't apply any sort of colors or assets to it. So and what I try to do, I don't know if this is as efficient as possible, but I try to pack the scene as much as I can because even though I'm going in a certain direction, I still really don't know what my finished result's going to look like. I don't know what I'm going to do or what specific camera angles. I really didn't plan that ahead of time, so I tried to complete the scene as much as possible and then eventually play around with the camera and try to find really cool angles. So I have seen a few people set up a scene specifically and really put detail towards it, but I feel like you can really start to kind of play around with it and be a little bit more creative if you create a scene and then move your characters around or move your camera around to find some really cool looking shots. So at this spot, I packed the scene quite a bit here, and I kind of like how it's looking. I think I'm a little bit nervous at, adding in. I think I just stick to this scene here, and then I end up changing the color of the dome light here to a really cool looking blue, just to create that deep sea atmosphere. And then at this point, I use a spotlight, bring it up, and then try to dim it down a little bit so you get the light on all these cool plants and rocks. You kind of keep it somewhat realistic with how the light is at the bottom of the ocean. So I knew with going in, I wanted to make a high contrast scene here. So with this, I'm looking for different color options to create a strong contrast between the colors of the plants and then the background. I think the biggest challenge I ran into is I've actually never modeled a fish before, and I was, somewhat impatient. So I ended up looking at a few different models from CG Trader. I brought them in. They were a little bit more low poly, and they came in without any of their colors or textures or anything. So I think the most difficult part was trying to figure out what direction I wanted to go in as far as the fish goes. At first, I wanted it to be more hyper realistic, and then as I start playing around with it, eventually I kind of settle on something a little bit more playful. So I actually cut it out here, but I've actually spent a few different hours of playing around with different textures and different colors of the fish, different models too. So I believe this model here is a bluegill that I use, but with the final renders, it definitely does not look like that fish at all. So I think that was one of the biggest things is I kind of had idea that I was originally going to do this hyper realistic looking fish, and then eventually it kind of just evolved into more of a playful look. And as I'm setting up this camera here, this will definitely not be the final result, but I liked how the plants look, especially how it is a little bit more out of focus in the background. So I thought it would be a pretty cool starting spot because you get the colors from the plants as a part of the scene, and then you also get that dark blue in the background. All right, so with this portion, I just kind of play around with the scene a little bit more. I try to figure out what I want to do with the eyes here of the fish, how I want to set up the scene in its entirety, and then I believe I also play around with the lighting here. So other than that, that's pretty much the end of the video. Let me know what you think down in the comment section, or if you want me to try a different scene, or if you want to kind of see how I approach something, feel free to let me know. I'm currently still working on the house scene here, so those videos should be up shortly. And then other than that, I'll try to find some new projects to work on to definitely share with you guys. And as always, enjoy the rest of the video, and I will see you on the next one, you guys.
What?